let's see if that, how
The
long
next
that
item
lasts.
is item number 22, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 14-9654, block 850, lot 25, 33 to 39 East 21st Street in the Ladies Mile Historic District, a neo-Renaissance style store and loft building designed by D.H. Burnham and Company and built in 1905 to 06, and a neo-Renaissance style store and loft building designed by John W. Stevens and built in 1902 to 03. This is an application to install storefront infill and awnings and enlarge an existing elevator bulkhead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Corey Durala, Preservation Department. 3539 East 21st Street is located on the north side of the street, mid-block between Park Avenue and Broadway. There are two large commercial buildings combined on this one lot. The proposal consists of storefront work and awnings for review by the Commissioners. Please note that the bases of both buildings were heavily altered prior to designation at the ground floor in particular, including the stripping and removal of many of the piers. You can see actually most everything between the outermost piers has at least been altered, and as has been confirmed by several pros. Also, the complete replacement of storefront, historic storefront entrance in the middle of that time. After designation, storefronts were replaced and the surrounds were reclad without LPC permits, and awnings were installed and replaced without LPC permits. So this again is the designation photo that you're looking at on the screen and current photos. So it looks similar, but the stone tile cladding was clad on top of again, and the openings were modified slightly, and then all new infill ahead. The box awning you're seeing there was also removed or relocated, and so was the longer awning. So moving on, the proposal before you today consists of storefront work and awnings again, and also the enlargement of an existing elevator bulkhead. So starting with the storefronts, the applicants propose to perform minor modifications to the existing storefront openings, mostly raising the lintels, and also to install clear anodized aluminum, I believe, storefronts consisting largely of operable doors and a double transom on glazing and louvers. I'll let the applicants talk about the finishes and specific materials later. The applicants also propose to relocate and reclad existing awnings and install new awnings, centering the box-style awning in the middle of the two buildings. So on that elevation at the bottom, I think it's hard to read on the screen, but that bigger flat-faced box awning would shift to the middle of the two buildings at that double pier line, and then a longer, flatter awning to both sides of that. So it's partial reclad and relocate and partial new awning work. And then just to skip ahead towards the stair bulkhead, what you're seeing here is a mock-up of that. It will be on top of an existing elevator bulkhead, and that's approximately 10 feet taller, so it's raising the existing elevator bulkhead by 10 feet. And you see the elevator bulkhead now in the image on your right, and you will, of course, also see the extra 10 feet above that, which is framed out by that mock-up. And turn it over to the architect to go through that.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you, Corey. Dave Nicholson from SPLM Architects. We're the architect for the building. Our relationships with the owner started about 2.5 years ago when it became apparent that he could vacate the existing ground floor and re-tenant the building, something he'd been trying to do since he first bought the building. There are a couple of things I want to point out to augment what Corey said. Something about the building the way it existed upon designation and today is that the additional stone surround didn't respect the existing lintels or cornice structure of the original building. You can see in these designation photographs, the stone surround creates a second height for the openings. And in both photographs, you see that the storefront is quite opaque. The doors are solid, and there's no visibility into the retail space. And those are two things that our design attempts to correct. function together. The entrance here, it goes to an office building lobby that straddles both buildings, to a pair of elevators, one of which sits in this building, one of which sits in that building. So this center element is important as the building functions, and the idea behind the center canopy with the single sign with the address and the words Gramercy Twins, which is a very old designation for these pair of buildings in the Ladies Mile District. That would be the only signage proposed. The canopy on either side of that is a thin band. It is a modification of the existing red one you see here over the west side, but doesn't exist on the east side. And we've changed the proportions of the center element to augment the office entrance. And these are drawings that showed where we probed. Corey mentioned that there had been work done without a permit since designation. Staff here at the commission wanted to ascertain if at the time of designation there was any historic fabric that had been covered that we might expose and refurbish. And the pros unfortunately revealed that the historic fabric had been removed certainly before designation. And these are our technical drawings showing the extent of the demolition. You'll see that the existing storefronts really don't respect the building line. This one, in fact, was at an angle on a raised platform, quite divorced from the historic storefront location. And these were opaque because actually they were egress doors. They didn't act as entrances. The new scheme, like I said, respects the existing lintel. The top frame is a louver to facilitate air conditioning of the retail spaces. I'm sorry, that's the existing. The proposed is over here where the glass extends. It is proposed to be clear anodized and a standard storefront section, standard rectangular storefront section. The other part of our application is to extend the elevator bulkhead. That is to facilitate the use of the roof as a recreational space for the office tenants. Only one elevator will be extended. The mock-up that Corey showed you demonstrates the extent of the extension. It needs to be built out of lightweight material due to structural limitations in the existing building, and we propose to clad it in brick face and paint it to match the existing building.
You like garden state brick face or
Well,
on there?
A scored stucco product that we use.
All right.
That is
Okay, that's it. Questions? Marjorie?
Could you go back to the facade elevation, the proposed rendering of the facade, and explain where's the front door to this building?
the front door of the office building is right here.
And the extent of your work, though, I mean, are you only working on the storefronts, or you're also working on the rest of the facade?
There's no work from here to here.
Okay, and that's because, do you represent the shop owner or the owner of the
The owner
building?
of the building.
So, and is there a reason why there's no work on that other little portion? Between there and there? Because you don't feel like it? Like
The
that,
owner has
right?
no desire to
Yeah,
change.
right. No, the reason that I'm asking this is because the facade is, that ground floor is extremely confusing, and it confuses the separation between the two buildings. You actually can't find the two buildings, right? And then that storefront, which, the one on the right, bears no resemblance to the one on the left. So, and then you don't actually think the one on one of them, you don't know which one is the front door, frankly. So how does your proposal sort of try to address sort of this problematic history with the building at the ground floor?
Well, it's a good question, and it's problematic, and I would take you back to the existing photographs, where the building has the same issue, but to a much greater degree. The canopies are different. The entrance to the office building is as difficult to read, if not more so. And there's absolutely no matching of two storefronts at all. Our design, to the extent possible, given the limitations, there are functional differences why the modules are different to suit the particular tenant's needs, are at least the same height, and the same material, and the same glass.
What are the functional differences for the module?
This is a restaurant. This is a meeting space.
So why do they need to have different modules spacing?
It's a tenant requirement. If you were to say to me, could we make them match? I would say yes, we probably could. If the commission thought that that was a real limitation of this design, it could probably be addressed.
Michael, and then Diana, and then Roberta, yeah.
Renderings show, to my eye, the framing, the new framing being black in color, yet you're saying that they're anodized, clear anodized.
That's correct.
Which is right?
The clear anodized.
So this should really not be black, it should be light silver white.
Correct.
And is that true for the second floor windows as well?
Second floor windows are,
Or their existing terrain?
they're black, they're very
Red.
dark colored.
Great, thanks.
Diana?
The existing photos show the framing of the door, I'll call it, as on one side the panels are actually bigger, much bigger than the panels. The panels on the left are bigger than the panels on the right in the existing photo. In other words, the two panels and the three panel, there are three panels on one side, two on the other, and they're thinner on the right than they are on the left. Then in the rendering of what is proposed, it looks like the panels are all the same size on both sides.
Are you speaking of
The white
the
panels.
size of the stone panel itself, or the
Yeah.
extent of it?
Yeah, the size of the stone panel.
Oh.
Because it looks like they're thinner in the, right there, like they look like they're all the same size. The ones on the right, the ones on the left. And in the actual, it appears that they're thin. So it's,
Yeah.
Three
you're-
and two
you're correct.
versus
This-
two and
This
two.
one is not shown accurately in the rendering.
Mhm.
Roberta? Oh, yep.
I actually had a further.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so, you know, in looking at this, I have the sort of commenting on the same thing, which is, if you had an awning over 35, over the center, if you had to divide at the bottom, the two buildings, make it evident that there were two buildings here, you know. Because right now, it's as Marjorie said, the base of the building appears that it's like one building, you know. Had you thought about possibly addressing that? I guess that wasn't part of your mandate from the owner, but.
Well, you know, certainly
Visually,
they were
visually
built-
externally,
They were built
not-
as two buildings, very short, one after the other, by
Yeah.
the same owner. And they function as a pair of buildings for most of their life.
Yeah, I understand.
So in terms of the users, visitors, it's one address, it's one central
Yeah.
entrance. And so it is a tension, right? The buildings, certainly when you look at the
I wasn't suggesting moving the entrance. I'm really thinking about the view that you have on the first floor, as opposed to leaving the entrance where it is and still distinguishing. Okay.
Okay, Roberta?
I guess I have a similar comment.
Yeah.
It was just that if you're treating it as one, then I think that you would look more at the sizing of the two glass storefronts, and that they actually would read as if they were related and not different. Otherwise, I think that it would benefit by having them be like two separate bottoms, two separate storefront areas or whatever. And having the one that has 35 done differently than the other side, and then it would be clearer again. But somehow it's just visually kind of disturbing as it is. I mean, it's either one or it's two, but it's like half.
Okay. I don't know whether you want to comment on that. We'll take that up in our discussion. Anything further now? Barbara Zay, there's testimony, please. Thank you.
Barbara Zay of the Historic Districts Council. These two neo-Renaissance store and loft buildings with their handsome detailing are wonderful contributions to the streetscape in the historic district. HDC finds that the treatment of the storefronts should reflect that there are two separate structures above, drawing the eye upward to the historic buildings. The continuous canvas awning seems to create a separation between the structures and the unified storefront below, which is completely divorced from the rest. There is an opportunity here to take the storefront in a better direction, but the proposed use of clear anodized aluminum seems like the beginning of another unfortunate chapter in its history. Thank you.
Okay, any other testimony? Okay, anything further to add based on what was said?
I'll add two things,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Certainly, if my client was anxious to replenish the building and open new businesses in a space that for many years was occupied by an establishment that wasn't complimentary at all to the building. If the commission were to approve my application with the condition that we satisfy certain redesigns of the storefront, even to material anodized to black, that would permit me to
Okay.
move the project along.
Let's see how we do. Discussion. Michael.
All right. Well, here we have a first floor of a lovely pair of buildings that have been butchered and have remained butchered, lying rancid on the meat locker floor for many,
Long
many
district.
years. And finally, we're getting a chance to look at a little bit of it. And I think that if I recall correctly, the precedents of other twinned buildings, whether they existed for many years as such or are being proposed now as being converted into such, our general direction has always been to the building owners that the individuality of the building should be retained to the greatest degree possible. And I think that even within the very circumscribed scope of this project, namely the storefront infills alone of the two retail tenants on the first floor and the canopies, opportunities were missed to push that agenda along, and I would urge the applicant to do so. If it would help him in his case with a landlord who is just now getting interested in making the building a little better, I would personally be open to letting the kind of suggestions that I'm going to make be handled at the staff level.
Okay.
But what are those comments? First, in the building to the east, former 39, where the new storefront comprises 4 panels of doors and then 2 side lights, or one of them is a door, one of them is a side light. That area of the facade most likely had a pier under each of the piers that are above it. There's a structural column within the metal piers there now, and I would urge the applicant to examine extending the masonry piers down to the ground floor, and perhaps relocating some of the doors. From an egress point of view, one does not require 4 doors from a retail space. And yes, it would involve a slight reduction in the amount of storefront, but it would increase the connection of this portion of the building to its to the rest of it above it. Or if not continuing the masonry down, then in some way relating the storefront design to the masonry above. And having any canopy that is over the storefront align with and be subservient to the storefront area, as again is very common in this district. If a canopy is needed for the office building entry, that can be done as an independent, not continuous, separate canopy or marquee. Often it's done in some harder material that we see we've seen numerous applications in this district where a hard marquee out of glass, out of metal, out of some other material is positioned over the office building entry to differentiate it. As the applicant said, he's looking to differentiate it. Let's differentiate it. By putting a continuous canopy over the thing, you draw the 2 buildings together, you make the problem worse. And I personally don't mind the fact that the mullions or divisions on the westernmost storefront are different. But I think in both cases you should be looking towards the original building or some historic precedents to decide on the design for the infill, apart from your generic Cournier bought from the shelf 8-foot-high doors that really don't seem to key into anything at all other than what came out of the catalog. And certainly I would indicate to the owner that I think from my point of view a proper landmark appropriate solution to this building would eventually involve the reinstitution of the divisions between the 2 buildings. And I have no problem with the rooftop stuff.
Yep. Oh, the rooftop, yeah.
Rooftop's fine.
Okay.
The bottom is not fine at all.
Oh, that?
And I think for me, even though this is an existing condition, I would oppose changing it from the existing condition to get this condition, which is an unusual thing to say, but I think this is, it's certainly not a step forward. If it is, it's a tiny step and just shouldn't be taken. Don't waste the money, I would say. So I think there are 2 choices. One is to be quite literal about restoring the missing parts, the legs that once went down, restore them pretty accurately to what was there, deal with the twinning of these buildings in some way that doesn't put an entry right in the middle. You know, that's easily done. Or the other option, which is to accept this kind of radical intervention, bad interventions which have occurred to the building over time, and be radically interesting about how to deal with that that condition, and make something bold and big and interesting and radical, or something kind of cool. I think those 2 extremes are what should be done, and this is, in my judgment, disastrously caught in the middle.
Yeah, I agree with all the comments so far, and to that point of the radical cool, actually there's a photograph from, I don't know when, just trying to judge by clothing, maybe in the 60s or something, which shows one of the sides of the facades with this kind of monumental arch underneath on the left side, so I guess that's the west side. No, that's the, west side. And it's actually much more sensitive to the piers that are endemic to the building with that kind of monumental arch than what's being proposed. So yes, either the design has to be a kind of a contemporary attack on this problem, or if you're going with this real basic solution, then you really do need to study the elements of the building, pull the piers down in some way, either with columns or with piers. we weren't provided with a floor plan, so we can't really tell what's going on behind those blanked piers, but it seems to me the storefronts could be enlarged, and you could start to bring back the symmetry, or not the symmetry, the separation between the two buildings, but also the relationship between the first floor and the floor above with the piers.
I'm going to.
Oh, sorry, I just left,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I made a note and then I forgot. And then in terms of the rooftop, I have an objection to the form, but I do have an objection to the cheesy material. So it needs to be something that stands up to the quality of the historic building, whether it be metal or otherwise.
I also don't object to the rooftop. I'm going to just walk up there because it's easier to explain what my comments made, but
All right.
I'd like to see the division come down, and as everybody else would, and these two are exactly the same. This is not bigger than this, according to the actual conditions. So actually, all you'd have to do is have this replicated on this side in order to come straight down the end of the building with this. So facing, if it were not these 3 panels, but a 2-panel facing, then have your canopies, the canopy just extend to the edge of this on both sides. So it also, the canopy was ending at the building line. And then have the other window openings covered just by the canopy, not have a full canopy all the way across. Just a pretty simple solution. And, you know, if we're not going to do a major redesign, okay?
Yes, I think that all we're looking for is a little order on that
Yes.
first floor. And so just to the eye, it looks like if it's not all one design together, then it definitely has to be reflective of the two buildings that exist.
There's some
Michael?
I agree with the return to a referential historic storefront. I'm okay with what's going on with the roof, except for the faux brick treatment and the stucco.
Okay. Rethink it along the lines you've heard here. We can't do all this by staff independently, if you will. But you have guidance to work with the staff, work with Corey, translate, if necessary, what's the consensus of what's been said, represent it, and then we can take an action at a public subsequent meeting, but not today, and we won't deny it. We'll just close the hearing today. Motion second without objection. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.